Hi everybody, we're 2 minutes early, no, we're 1 minute early because I pressed go live by mistake. So here we are.
Here we are.
I am Sorrel, this is Mark, who is, for anyone who's not familiar with us, he's my partner, I'm his partner. It's a mutual thing, isn't it?
Yes.
And together we are Relationship Rebellion. And we spent the last 5 weeks talking about the losing strategies in relationships. Like, how to do it wrong and make a mess of it and probably end up getting divorced if you push it too far. And today we want to talk about how to get it right. But we realise this is a huge topic and there's no way we can possibly cover it all in half an hour. So we're going to give you a sort of, a potted version. And before I go any further, if you are watching us live, please let us know in the comments so that we know that someone's watching us. It's always nice to know if you've got an audience. And most of the time, we don't know because people don't bother telling us until afterwards. Still not. Oh, it's just 2 o'clock.
That sounded so needy.
Didn't it sound needy?
That sounded desperately needy.
Anyway, no, but if you're there, we'd love to know that you're there. That doesn't sound so needy, does it?
That's right.
Oh, I'll try not to overshare. Okay. So shall we start with first and second consciousness? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
So actually, a few, maybe 3 months ago, you coined this expression, as I recall, which is about dropping out of consciousness into program. And that means when you're not being present and you're not being conscious and you're reverting back to your old programs that you probably developed as a child to keep you safe as a child, and which you've probably been running. I should stop saying you and maybe say me for a change. That we've been running for all our lives without being aware of it. And then suddenly one day you realise that this old program that you've been running, like my thing of wanting to be right all the time, doesn't actually work. And it's better not to be always trying to be right and trying to prove that I'm right. And that's the consciousness side of it. So first consciousness is program, and second consciousness is what we call consciousness, just to confuse everybody. So if you want to be relationally mindful, which means that you're keeping your relationship center stage in your mind, no matter what's happening in between you, in the moment, as it were, then you've got to be in that second consciousness, in what we call consciousness. You look like you're thinking something.
I am. That was beautifully put.
Thank you.
The 5 losing strategies really are just simply a wonderful description of how people who have been attacked and therefore taught to attack behave.
Yeah.
Right. So they're all defensive aggressive stances. And if you don't do any of them, things will go better. You just won't add that chili to the mix. And
are you being rude about curries?
I am indeed. And there is consciousness, because when you're faced with somebody who's doing all those attacking moves on you, it tells you precisely how they feel.
So do you remember we talked earlier about compassion and curiosity?
Yes.
Yeah. So we had a conversation just after lunch in which we talked about how to respond when your partner is attacking you or is going off on some sort of passive aggressive something or other or whatever. Rather than attacking back, you can take a step back mentally, or you can possibly physically actually, and just be a bit curious and compassionate, because if that person has dropped into program, there's probably something not quite right up here that's bothering them. And then that's where the curiosity comes in. So what's going on for you at the moment? Why are you so upset or whatever? And then you used some swordsmanship thing, which I never could possibly hope to repeat, but it was about.
Yes, it is. If you're dealing with somebody who you're fond of, and who you want to continue to be fond of, instead of thwacking them back round the edge, you should actually retreat a poke. Oops, offer it a biscuit or something, because we all have the capacity to be unreasonable. What we don't have is the capacity to recognise when somebody is being unreasonable, because then your first imprint turns up. Oh, I'm being attacked. I'll just bloody attack you back. And when people do the same thing at the same time, it's just utterly meaningless. One of you has to recognise the instability of the other and just retreat a bit and then offer a biscuit or something. Because you know, we are all intemperate, unreliable, crazy, toxed up, ill-considered beings for much of our time.
We are.
And when one sees it full on, that's a time for care.
Actually, no, that's not true. You are.
Right, there you go. I don't mind. I don't mind. You know, this is just the management of cross people. And the whole key about managing cross people, making attacking moves, is just not make them crosser. And this is management. Yeah. This is management of people who are cross. And if one knows how to manage people who are cross, then they don't get around to smashing the toilets because you listened to them earlier on. You got there earlier on.
And that's another key thing, is the listening, isn't it?
Yes.
Because for most of us, when we think we're listening, we are not really listening, because we're thinking about what we're going to say next.
That is correct.
Or possibly what question we might want to ask, or what advice to give the person.
Precisely.
And if you're listening to listen, then none of that stuff is going on in your mind. It's you've got a clear mind and you're waiting to hear what comes up as they speak.
And you will be a very satisfying talking experience. And that is the harmony that we are looking for in relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, that is the sort of thing. And if a party listens like that, the other party is unlikely to explode their mind.
Well, they might do. And to be honest, that does bring us to the question of boundaries.
Yeah, it does.
So actually, which one is it? The third losing strategy is unbridled self-expression.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that is an issue around boundaries. So in fact, that's two boundaries. The first boundary is that you don't have your own containing boundary that stops you from...
You're not in control.
Dumping all your shit.
You're not in control. That's why you're doing this.
Yeah. And the other boundary is that you're then infringing somebody else's boundary because you're stuffing or shoving or throwing all this stuff at them that really they don't want. So
within a relationship. Are you weird or what? Why is that? That's just not a good thing to do. Yeah.
So then what we're thinking about is, I forgot what I was going to say now. I've lost my thread. We were talking about...
we were talking about having the inner boundaries to manage yourself before you make bad moves like that.
Yeah, and actually what we were talking about is listening, weren't we? So if you're listening to a partner and they've started to engage in unbridled self-expression, you are entitled to say, okay, I've been listening to you and this is what I'm hearing. And it's up to you how you phrase this, but, you know, do you think you've told me enough now? Or do you just want to keep going? Because if you do, I think I might just go to another room or go for a walk, use time out.
So, you know, yes. We're very civil, you and I.
Yeah, we are.
We are very, very civil. Most folk, healthy folk, what they do is they go, have you finished yet? They just don't pick it up at all.
That's the passive-aggressive version.
Well, what it is, it's just an airbag. It's just that I'm not bothered. I will be patient with you because we're moderately fond of each other. But I recognise that you're having a head moment.
You're indulging tanty.
And this is how, exactly. Yeah. And once that is recognised and accepted, the entire passion is turned into something else.
And what's the something else?
Well, it's the fact that the party, in my case...
Oh, right.
When
tells just use A and B.
Just shut up. That's quite exactly. Just all right. I'll put 10 minutes in. All right. Is this a video? You know. And that's how that's another way to just bring folk down.
And can I offer you a biscuit?
You probably need a biscuit. These are peacemaking moves.
Yeah.
And people who are using losing strategies don't know about peacemaking moves. And a peacemaking move is to envelop an attack, not take it too seriously. It was just a noise. And then look at the condition of the person who threw it at you.
Yes.
And then if you're going to have a relationship with them that might be vaguely nice, offer them a biscuit. Don't hit them with a frying pan. You know, this is just civil, isn't it? And what we don't find in relationships that are full of anger, they're just not civil. That's because two people in there are not being civil.
No,
and so most relationship coaching, I reckon, is probably balancing these behaviors. You know, people who aren't civil don't know that they're not civil. They're just doing their old programs, right?
Yeah, and all sorts, excuse me, there's all sorts of nuances. Like when you recognise that you have been attempting to mind read your other half, and you think you know what they think or what they would say, but you don't. You've just made it all up.
Yes, that's really healthy. It's really healthy to know that you can't actually read people's minds and that you do make up all kinds of nonsense all the time about everything.
Yeah.
And that, and when you're dealing with something important, you can just sort of know that about yourself and stay to the actual important bit. It's really...
And actually to be able to recognise when you've got to the important bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is how do we feel about each other? After that, everything else is just a detail that we can manage.
I think sometimes the details are important.
Well, of course, the details are important, but they are not the...
But they're not critical thing.
They're not the reason.
No. So with you and me, every Saturday morning, Mark just appears off to the studio, and I'm expecting him back about 1:45. And I said to him this morning, I get nervous before relationship rebellion, because I would anyway, regardless of what time Mark got back. But I just said to you, didn't I? The later you are, the more nervous I get.
And I got all gentlemanly about it. And I was still a little bit late, but it wasn't horribly late.
No, you were actually, you said you'd be back by 1, and I said you managed my expectations.
Oh, thank God for that.
And you got back at 10 to 1.
I thought I was supposed to be back at 1:45. That's when you started getting anxious.
Yes, I do. Anyway, so... Well, I used to get anxious at 12:30. Anyway, so this is a detail. But the thing about these details is that you can actually, we do in relationships tend to let them pile up. And so the little details are like as a mountain of little details. I'm not saying we don't do this really, but I know I've done that for previous relationships. And that mountain of details then becomes insurmountable, and it becomes a cause of resentment, and it becomes all kinds of...
It's just like a flat that hasn't been tidied up for years. And is full of rubbish.
And they become missiles, don't they?
Unhealthy dwellers, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
just uncleared.
So, anyway, where are we?
How much time have we got?
We are loads of time. We've got 19 minutes left.
Okay.
So one thing that we wanted to say is I think probably most people assume that if your relationship is in trouble and you know that both of you have got whatever you want to call it, issues, you've got trauma in your past or whatever, you just need to fix yourselves independently of each other, and then your relationship will be okay. And that might be true for some people, but you can't rely on it. And actually, if you get the relationship working, the whole healing process of the two of you becomes much easier. So it's like, don't put the cart before the horse, put the horse before the cart. Because in a wonderful, loving, healthy relationship where there isn't loads and loads of conflict and toilet smashing and withdrawing and going to mum's house for the weekend because you can't bear another minute with him or whatever, when you've got a good, healthy relationship, the healing is so much easier because you've got this lovely ground. It's like the ground in which you plant the seed. The seed will grow much more easily. Whereas if you're in a very conflict-ridden relationship, this ground is stony, isn't it?
You're not going to get better.
Not that easily, no.
No. And you won't be able to heal yourself, and you won't be able to heal your relationship because you're hard-minded, you're hard-hearted, and you're utterly entrenched, challenged, and trying to be right about everything. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So have I.
Yes, there we go. And I think that is a rite of passage. You have to have a go at being a totalitarian dictator before you realise that it has no future.
Well,
children do it.
Yeah, well, maybe if we could just...
Some of them would get away with it for most of their lives.
Maybe if we could stop doing it when we turn 21 or something, wouldn't that be wonderful? Or even 31.
Well, yes. I mean, I think it's a rite of passage. When you want to have some nice relationships in your life, generally speaking, become a nice person. And that's what happens.
You definitely want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you become a nicer person, which is one less likely to go off on any old tangent of weirdness, and one is more likely to stay in reason, then all of your friendships will improve because you'll be the one who's unflustered.
There's that also.
You know?
Yeah, and actually friendships and also relationships with your children or with your siblings.
That's right. And it's never actually about the disaster. It's never about the crash. It's always about the recovery. One cannot have a relationship and not expect to crash. The question is can one recover easily?
Yeah.
Easily. And so, And so points for staff for recovery, basically. Basically, if you can recover, you're in. I mean, don't worry about it. It's fine. You're going to muck it up.
Yeah, but that's the thing, as we were saying earlier, isn't it? That we will drop back into program with the monotonous regularity. But every time you do that, you recognize what you're doing. You become conscious again. You become mindful of what you're doing, and then you just say, "Well, I'm not going to do this again anymore. I know I started it, but I stop now."
And in that way, you reassure your partner that you are growing.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a wonderful and beautiful, conscious way.
Yeah.
Of trying not to be an inconvenience.
Oh, that was.
Just in case.
That was a good saying,
it was
darling.
Good, wasn't it?
I had a word in my mind. I was thinking,
he's not going to say that word. He's not. But yes, it talks about control. It's just control.
Yeah.
It's just control of oneself and one's relationships, without being absent, without being distant, without being hostile, without being unavailable.
And recognise, because this is something I get with my clients. They say, but it's really hard. It takes me 3 weeks to remember that And I say, yeah, well, next time it'll only take you 2 weeks.
Yeah, be okay with it.
And so each time it's like a practice. It's like learning to play a musical instrument. The more you practice, the better you get at it. So you practice relational.
And actually being a deeply gorgeous being who has lovely relationships and is well with their world. Well, that's about as rare as unicorn poo. But I think we can just do it.
You know what? You're such a cynic.
I am.
But I think
it's just a choice. It's just a choice. I'm going to be better at this. I'm just going to be better at this.
Yeah.
And that begins with confining one's spite and one's indignation and one's offended righteousness, and coming to the place more reasonably.
So shall we give the people some things that they can do, so that when they say, "Oh, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to do it the new way. I'm going to be the new me, as it were."
Go on.
So last time we talked about timeout, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So if you want to find about timeout, please go back to the last week's session, because I really want to talk about it again, because it's quite long and complicated. And
which is funny.
You can Google it. It's out there on the internet.
Yes,
it's not. We didn't make it up. Anyway, the second thing, this is something we talked about earlier. We did all of this before. This is great. We actually had a proper rehearsal. We talked about refuse to accept that you or your other half cannot control themselves. Because if you can't control yourself, you should probably be either in prison or a psychiatric institution. So when they say, I can't control myself, you know that they're either kidding you or they're kidding themselves, but it's not true. And when you recognize that it's not true, then you can say, well, I know that you can control yourself because I've seen you do it before, or whatever. So that's
very true, actually. When did you last poo yourself in public?
Yes, exactly.
You know, I think that there's some control there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think you've got it. Just need to move the dial to include temperament.
Anyway, so that was the second thing. The third thing was all about boundaries. So about respecting your other half's boundaries, and also thinking about the sort of containing of yourself, and the fact that you're entitled to have boundaries around, like the classic example is sexual boundaries. So if there's some practice that you just don't like, he or she has no right to try to persuade or coerce you into engaging in that practice.
Correct.
That's just respecting boundaries.
It's all about consent, isn't it?
And it's the other thing is like, oh, so I'm a vegetarian, so why are you trying to force meat on me?
Yes.
My boundary says I don't accept meat from other people. I think that would be very weird, actually, if my partner, I've never had a partner who tried to make me eat meat. That would be super weird. But I've known other people try and say, oh, Storm, come on, just have a little bit, it won't hurt. Anyway, and the really, really big thing.
That's how heroin pushers work.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't work on me. Well, definitely not now, anyway. So, yeah, self-esteem. So I'm sure we've mentioned this before. But in these kinds of relationships where things are so crashingly awful, very often one person's got low self-esteem and the other one has got high self-esteem, or too much self-esteem. And what we all have to remember is that we're all worth the same. And I might have said this on this channel before, I cannot remember, but you're either a 0 or you're a 1. If you're a 1, you're alive. If you're a 0, you're dead. Which basically means anyone who's alive is a 1. Now, I made that up. That's my thing. But we're all worth the same. And I just happened to put it into computer language.
And so that therefore means that you are everyone's equal.
Yeah.
Just by being here.
Yeah.
You are everyone's equal.
Yeah. It doesn't mean say that I'm everyone's equal at playing the piano or computer coding.
Of equal worth.
But of worth. Of your innate worth, is that thing?
Well, that's right. That's sacred consciousness, riding a skin suit here, talking to you.
Yes, exactly.
You know, you just got to be respectful of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, so if in your relationship, one of you is like 1 down and one of you is 1 up, yeah, you've got to come down to the middle, both of you, so you're face to face, as it were. And sometimes the person who's on top doesn't really want to come down.
This is because people in victory can be very, very spiteful. Once you've won a long battle, or whatever you think is a long battle, and you finally think you've got control, that is when people reveal their inner nasty, because they punish people for too long.
Yeah.
They punish people too harshly.
Yeah.
They reveal their inner cruelty.
Yeah.
And I recognize that as confession. So, you know, if you're in victory, you need to get away from that position really fast, because it includes vanquished.
Of course it does.
And, you know, the vanquished are upset, mate. You know, this is a bad management thing. You know, this is not a win-win.
No, it's not.
Exactly. So when I see cruelty on behalf of the dominant party, I know I'm dealing with spite.
Yes.
I know I'm dealing with spite. And I know that it will have, not only will it have this relationship, it will have many relationships that carry this flavor. And the common flavor, the common thing is that it is cruel in victory. It's spiteful in victory. That's why people have to fight it so hard. And that's why it has such a cataclysm of ruined relationships behind it.
So it's a lot of people trying to protect themselves.
That's right. Yeah. So this character needs to know more about love.
Of course. Yeah.
Precisely.
And that in a way looks like relational mindfulness. Because if you love this person, or you want to love this person because you've kind of lost sight of what it is to love someone,
yes,
then it's all about the relationship.
That's right. And what you do is you fill your spite banks with love skills, love flavors. You don't want to get off on the cruelty of being right. What you want is a future.
I love your metaphor for spite bank. Did you say spite? Oh, spite tank, you said.
Yeah, or bank, whichever it is. Whichever it is your reflex behavior. You know, it's to make something else.
You know what? The spite tank doesn't exist, does it? That's just a metaphor.
Do you know, it's a button on people's control panel.
It is.
And what we want is we don't want to press that button.
No,
exactly. Let it gather the dust. So, press this one, which gets you better results.
So we're just going back. We're going back to the same thing we were talking about earlier, which is when you've dropped out of consciousness into program.
Yes.
And you want to bring yourself back to consciousness.
Yes.
And then recognize that being spiteful just isn't very clever.
That's right. And there's the decision to become sweeter.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you would like to push, if you want sweet relationships, you need to put that sweetness into them.
Of course.
Love.
Yes.
There we go.
So the other thing I wanted to say about it actually isn't what it is a bit. So, okay, so what we haven't talked about much today is the fact that the program side of it, the first consciousness, is we did mention this at the beginning, it is mostly about things we learned as children to keep us safe as children. And so people who have overly high self-esteem, so that's what Terry Real calls grandiosity. I like that word, grandiosity. There are two reasons people become like that. One is that they were brought up to just like, yeah, this is how you do it, mate. I beat you up, you beat up your little brother. I say, great, well done for beating up your little brother. Just go out there and beat everybody up. Or it's because you've got really low self-esteem and you're compensating for it by bringing yourself up on top. And I would say, in my experience of many, well, I haven't been in that many relationships, but the ones I've been in before, I kind of got the impression that the men I was with were bigging themselves up by putting me down. And I could pretty much guarantee that they'd all had low self-esteem. So their grandiosity came from that attempt to compensate themselves for that low self-esteem. But there are some men out there who they're just entitled. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, it's just worth remembering. It's just worth being aware of the fact.
If somebody gets to feel better because you feel less, It's not a sweet space
No,
to
of
be
course
in.
it's not,
It's not
no.
you know, I recognise a vampiric value to that.
There's massively vampiric.
Yes. So, yeah. And you know what? It was taught. It was taught that. It had it done to it. It was taught how to do it.
Yeah.
And it's taught, and it's good at it, and it doesn't know how to do anything else. It has to see some other way before it can drop this skill set and pick up a more efficient one.
So we come back to that thing again about, okay, you've made that decision that you don't want to be grandiose anymore.
You recognise your own repellence. This is the.
Will you let me finish? So you've recognised that you don't want to be grandiose, that you've recognised that actually you will have the same worth as your partner, but you're behaving as if you're worth more than they are. And you know that if you want this to continue, if you don't want to end up in, excuse me, I've got to forget myself again. If you don't want to end up in the divorce courts, as it were, you've got to deal with your grandiosity, and you will forget, and you will drop out of consciousness into program. And every time it happens, possibly with a little gentle reminder from your other half, who now is a little bit empowered, because she knows that you want to be grandiose, that you actually want to be in this relationship, as opposed to moving away from it. Then you come back to that mindfulness, that relational mindfulness, the second consciousness, and you say, I'm sorry. So you can actually do that move up and down that self-esteem scale very easily. And just remember that if you're finding it difficult, it's like practice.
The moment it happens is when you choose it. It's the difference between a child scribbling on a page and then a child actually trying to draw something.
Yeah, and I like that. It's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're scribbling on the page, you're going to get scribbled.
And if you're going for couples therapy and you want it to work and you don't want to be forking all this money then for no purpose, you start doing these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, we've now got 4 minutes left. And there are 5 winning strategies. And to be honest, these are a little complex. So I'm going to run through them very fast, given I've only got 4 minutes left. The first one is the really easy one. And it's particularly, we can go for either partner with you, but I know I've needed it, to move from complaint to request. So instead of saying, God, you never get the bins out on time, what's wrong with you? Should be a complaint. You say, darling, could you make sure you got the bins out before 7 a.m. because that's when the dustmen come to collect the bins. It's just a request, isn't it? And then when he says yes and he does it, you reward him by saying, thank you. That really helped. It's great to have empty bins. The second thing is about the repair process in a relationship. So it's what Terry Real says in his book, which is where this is his book. We're getting all this stuff from the New Rules of Marriage by Terry Real. He calls it speaking out with love and savvy. So you're remembering that this is about love, and do we use the word savvy in this country?
No.
That's what I was thinking. It means using nous, doesn't it, really?
It comes from the French savoir, and then it went across the pond and became savvy. And we brought it back. So
it's kind of nous, isn't it? It's like knowing how to do things.
It means understanding, yes, comprehension.
So it's basically saying whatever you're doing, recognise, there are things that you've now learned that you want to apply. That's your savvy.
Yes, that's your understanding.
And then, so those are the 2 things to do with asking for things and getting what you need.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it is responding with generosity. So when your partner asks for something, you're generous about it. And when they offer you something, you're generous about it as well. So you're generous in your thank youing. And then empowering each other. So it's not just about empowering me, it's about empowering both of us.
That sounds like a lovely relationship to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And the 5th one is actually cherishing the relationship. So, the relationship is the key thing here. It isn't about 2 individuals trying to kind of muddle along. It's about having a relationship between those 2 individuals in which they both benefit, and the relationship itself grows like that seed in the
And it's a nice place to be in. If it's a nice place to be in, it's likely to last.
Yes, absolutely.
When that stops, something else happens.
Yeah. And if it does stop, what can you do to repair it? And that's, again, coming back to speaking out with love and savvy. Because, of course, it's going to be ruptures from time to time. Of course, you're going to do things that are upsetting, or you're going to say something stupid, or you're going to...
The crisis is inevitable.
Yeah.
It's the recovery. It's always the recovery.
Recovery.
Yeah.
Right. I can't be got through my entire page of A4. I'm really pleased. Is there anything you want to add before we get Harry in to say goodbye?
Loads of very, very deep, meaningful things, but for now, have a go at being lovely to each other.
Oh, and we have to say that we may never come back and do this ever again. But we'll see about that. We've got 2 weeks holiday. We're going to be pondering it, aren't we? And then if we do decide to come back, we'll let you know. But this is our 13th session. Whew.
Magical.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Harry wants to say goodbye.
I'm just the props.
You're the props master.
Good luck in all of your relationships. From me, the hair, and her.
And from him.
Bye-bye.
Bye.